forget. Go on any playground of any kindergarten or first grade, anywhere in the world, you'll see 30, 40, 50 storytellers. Go and listen. Listen to what little kids say. They make up stories all the time. They play Let's Pretend. They make up characters. They become characters. What stops them? Bad parenting, bad teachers, inhibition. We pull into ourselves and we forget what artists we are. That's what I try to do. That's what I do with these films. I brought out the artistry in all of those people, not the professional actors, but even with them. You know, Vinette and Frank, those of you who know them from Heath's grocery store in Moultonborough or Center Harbor, they're great actors. She's also a great cashier, but I was happy to remind her what a fantastic actress she is, and Frank the same thing. So think about it. Well, all of us are storytellers. Who doesn't have an uncle who wants to tell you his great story, or you know, you can't wait to get home and tell your spouse, you're not going to believe what happened to me today. I was in Hannaford's, and my wife does it all the time. She's a terrific storyteller, and I love hearing her stories. So we all can do it, and those of us who are lucky enough to be you know, endorsed in some way, we're the luckiest people in the world because we get paid to share our dreams and our ideas. Anybody else? Way back I saw. Yes. You can go first.
Oh, me?
You both have the same color, so it doesn't matter.
You know, I loved the humor was very specific, so like references to Gulliver's Travels, and so I'm just wondering, when you're writing, is part of your process to do table reads with the script, or if you're laughing at what you're writing, that's enough for you because you're experienced enough to know it's going to translate on the screen.
I like to believe that's true, but I do read. I do have people read.
Okay.
You know, we always do a table read before we do anything. There's not always a lot of time when you're shooting on a non-budget. Some actors love to rehearse and some don't, and I'm always a little bit wary. This project I'm working right now that I mentioned earlier, a remake of Paper Chase, I'm not sure how much of a sense of humor one of my producers has, so I kind of have to explain things to him sometimes. But I know what I said earlier. You want an audience to laugh. So yeah, if it makes me laugh, it's probably pretty funny, because I have a pretty discerning sense of humor. More importantly, if it moves me, and I always say this to the writers, you can all testify to this who come to the workshop. If you write something and it touches you in some way, if you feel a tear come to your eye, you know you're onto something, because it's going to move somebody else too, and that never fails. That scene in this movie, which is an hilarious movie, when Maybe comes to him and says, I got a call, and Miss Dibble couldn't get through to you because your phone seemed to have gone in the pond or something. She needs you to be in LA because there's a studio interested in you. That should be the happiest moment in the guy's life. It should be a ride. He's out of there. But we all fell for him, and we fell for all the people he was going to leave behind because he wasn't fooling anybody anymore. When I wrote that, I knew I was onto something, because everybody has a dream, and sometimes we confuse what the dream is. He thought he was coming back here to con everybody out of money and just take it and run, and he got hooked. And he got hooked because of the honesty, the sincerity, the generosity, and genuineness of all of those townspeople. I knew when I was getting into that I was onto something. And I love writing about that stuff because there's such a divide in our culture and our society. Home on Golden Pond, when you see that, and I hope you will soon, I read a lot about the class divide, because where we live up in the Lakes region, there's such a segregation between the summer people and the locals. For all intents and purposes, I'm a local. And I get to see the summer people come in, and I get to cheer when they leave the day after Labor Day. But you know, we don't hear a lot about that. You know, we hear the ridiculous class divide, the 1/10 of 1%, or we hear racial divides. But we have a ridiculous caste system right here in New Hampshire. So I like writing about that. I like talking about those things. But one of the things my writers are going to know is that at the workshops, I divide them into the 5 basic tenets as I see them of writing. And they are emotion, character, plot, dialogue, and message. And if you're not putting a message in something you've written, then you're wasting your time, and you're wasting the audience's time. So you can decide what the message is of these two movies, and it may be, if there are 150 people here tonight, it may be 150 different messages, but you're all going to think about them. And so all of those elements go into my telling of the story, starting with this question here, which was really smart, to your question. First of all, I know I can do it. I know I'm pretty good at it, and I have the power to amuse and to move. That's all I need. And it doesn't really matter to me the size of the canvas. I'm just as happy making this movie for nothing as I have been making a movie that's $50, $60 million budget, or the ones that are upcoming. And same in the theater. Some of you who are locals in the Lakes region know I've done plays at Pittman's Freight Room, the little church theater at Holderness. I love it. It doesn't make any difference to me. I'll do exactly the same work. I'll give my 100% no matter whom I'm working with. And I would boldly state that I could hold up most of the performances in these movies to anybody, to any movie star. I could have shot this movie, in a fantasy land. I could have said, well, let's see, who can play Mooch the drunk? John Goodman would be good for that. Or who's going to play the movie star? I don't know if you noticed, but it would be hard to notice, but do you remember Karen Black, the actress Karen Black? She was a dear friend of mine. And so the character Destiny, I modeled after Karen. And Laurie got to meet Karen Black when she stayed at our house one time. And but Karen Black could have played that role. Would it have been any better than Laurie Gigliotti Murphy? I don't think so. Or Morgan, or anybody in this room, any actor in this room. I got to be able for them to trust me. And I try to set a good example every day myself. Show up, know my lines, being ready, being alert, being present, and that's all it is. And I don't mean to ramble, that sounds as if I am, but I have worked with some really fabulous, famous, legendary actors. They're all nuts. Because we're all nuts. And my question always is, when I'm having auditions, if somebody comes in, an actor comes in, and I think, oh, they're really crazy, but is it a crazy I can work with? Because if it's crazy I can work with, I'm home free. So I don't know what I was answering, but who else has a question? This young lady does. Yeah.
Young lady?
Yeah, young lady.
So the question that I've always meant to ask you, and I can still not get my head around it, that you wrote on Golden Pond when you were 27, 28?
28.
28. And now I'm below age. How the hell did you do it? How did a 28-year-old guy get into the heads of these characters in that situation? Because every time I see it, and I've seen your more recent stage productions of it, and I rewatched the movie, and I sob, because I'm now 65, and going into that area where this kind of thing could happen, and I really get those characters, and I just break my heart. But how did you write that at 28? How could you possibly have known what that would be like?
I didn't. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. This is the wonderful actress who played Mrs. Bly in the first movie. Perhaps you recognize the accent.
I'm still putting it on for tonight, but I'm really California.
Yeah. I don't know what a Scottish housekeeper.
No, you wrote my aunties.
Yeah. Well, that's
you
what I do.
My aunties,
that's what I do.
Obviously, I'm not Mrs. Bly, but that's just fascinating.
But here's what I believe: that the human condition is neutral. That we all have the same basic feelings. Again, go back to the kindergarten playground. They take different forms as we get older. So a 28-year-old guy writing about an 80-year-old man, I just try to graft my fear, my sadness, my joy, my cynicism, my smartassedness onto a guy. So what's the difference, And I've heard that question, believe me, that would be a million times now. And although I don't really get asked that question, how can someone so young know so much about people? But I don't know. I don't think there's an answer to it. I think it's like asking Picasso why there are two eyes on one side of the nose. That's how he saw it that particular day. And so, and I really appreciate the question, but I've written about lesbians, as far as I know I'm not one. I've written small children. I've written people of color. My new script for the remake of Paper Chase, which I'm calling Chasing Alethea, there's a Korean guy, an Argentine, a black guy, and everybody else is sort of normal, white, American, conventional. I don't know, it doesn't seem any different to me. You know, a Korean guy, I have a nephew and niece who are Korean, so I know a little bit about that, but I also know what I feel. So what would I feel like if I were a first-year Harvard Law student, frightened, nervous that I'm not going to be able to succeed, concerned that my family back in Korea is worried that I'm not going to be able to succeed on their behalf, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all to me storytelling is. Any last questions? There's one down here.
Less a question than a statement.
Okay.
Oh.
Hi there. Very nice.
Good guess.
All right.
Good movie.